In the shadowed corridors of Renaissance Florence, where power shifted like mercury and alliances crumbled faster than autumn leaves, Niccolò Machiavelli observed a profound truth that would echo through centuries. It wasn't merely about acquiring power, it was about wielding an invisible force that made others gravitate toward you, compelled by something they couldn't quite name. This force, which he coded in his writings as virtue, transcended mere political maneuvering. It was the art of irresistible presence. Machiavelli's genius lay not in teaching cruelty or deception, as popular culture suggests, but in revealing the subtle mechanics of human magnetism. Through his careful study of Lorenzo de' Medici, Cesare Borgia, and other luminaries of his age, he decoded what separated those who commanded rooms from those who merely occupied them. His observations, scattered across the prints, the discourses, and his private correspondence, reveal 7 unmistakable signs that someone is developing this rare quality, signs that remain as relevant in today's boardrooms and social gatherings as they were in the palaces of 16th century Italy. The first clue emerges in how a person responds to unexpected challenges. Machiavelli noticed that certain individuals possessed what he called sprezzatura, a studied nonchalance that made the difficult appear effortless. When Lorenzo de' Medici faced the Pazzi conspiracy, an assassination attempt that left his brother dead beside him, his response revealed this quality. Rather than flee in panic or seek immediate revenge, Lorenzo appeared the next morning in the piazza, wounds visible but demeanor unshaken. He spoke to the gathering crowd not with the trembling voice of a victim, but with the calm authority of someone who had already processed the attempt on his life and emerged stronger. This wasn't mere bravado. Machiavelli understood that true presence manifests when chaos strikes and others look desperately for someone to follow. The developing magnetism reveals itself in these moments of crisis through a peculiar alchemy. The person simultaneously acknowledges the gravity of the situation while maintaining an inner equilibrium that seems almost supernatural to observers. They don't minimize the danger or pretend everything is fine. Instead, they demonstrate what Machiavelli termed flexible strength, the ability to bend without breaking, to adapt without losing core identity. In modern contexts, this manifests when someone faces a public failure, a professional setback, or personal crisis. Where others might disappear, make excuses, or become defensive, those developing irresistible presence step forward. They own the situation completely while maintaining an almost preternatural calm. Their response isn't scripted or calculated, it flows from a deep well of self-possession that others find magnetically compelling. The second clue lies in their relationship with secrets and information. Machiavelli was fascinated by how certain people seem to know things before others, not through espionage or gossip, but through an intuitive understanding of human nature and political currents. These individuals developed what he called the ear of truth, an ability to hear what wasn't being said and to understand the subtext beneath every conversation. Cesare Borgia exemplified this quality. When he entered a new territory, he didn't rely solely on intelligence reports or formal briefings. Instead, he would appear unexpectedly in markets, taverns, and common gathering places, not in disguise but simply unannounced. He listened not just to words but to tone, not just to what people said but to what they carefully avoided saying. Within days, he understood the true power dynamics of a region better than advisors who had lived there for years. Those developing irresistible presence today display a similar quality. They're the ones who somehow know about the office reorganization before it's announced, who sense relationship troubles between friends before anyone else, who anticipate market shifts before they become obvious. This isn't because they're manipulative or calculating, but because they've developed an almost supernatural sensitivity to human undercurrents. They listen differently than others. While most people listen for confirmation of their existing beliefs or for their turn to speak, these individuals listen for what Machiavelli called the music beneath the words. They notice when someone's enthusiasm feels forced, when confidence masks uncertainty, when silence carries more weight than speech. They've learned that power often hides in the gaps between what people say and what they mean. This sensitivity extends to their own communication. They understand that the most powerful messages are often delivered indirectly. Rather than making bold pronouncements, they ask questions that lead others to their own revelations. Rather than demanding attention, they create space for others to fill with their own projections and desires. They've discovered what Machiavelli knew, that people are more compelled by conclusions they reach themselves than by arguments imposed upon them. The third clue reveals itself in how they handle their own mistakes and vulnerabilities. Counter to popular belief about Machiavellian behavior, those developing true presence don't hide their flaws, they transform them into sources of strength. Machiavelli observed this in his study of ancient Roman leaders and contemporary princes alike. The most magnetic figures weren't those who appeared perfect, but those who wore their scars as badges of honor while maintaining an aura of invincibility. Francesco Sforza, Duke of Milan, embodied this paradox. Born illegitimate, he could have spent his life hiding his origins or compensating through aggression. Instead, he spoke openly about his humble beginnings while carrying himself with such natural authority that others forgot he wasn't born to power. When political enemies tried to use his background against him, the attacks fell flat because Sforza had already integrated his story into his strength. Machiavelli understood that this transformation requires what he called the courage of truth. It means facing one's limitations without being diminished by them. Those developing irresistible presence don't pretend to be without flaws, they simply refuse to let those flaws define their worth or limit their aspirations. They've learned the alchemical secret of transmuting weakness into wisdom, failure into fuel. In contemporary settings, this quality manifests in leaders who acknowledge their learning curve while projecting confidence in their ability to grow, in public speakers who address their nervousness in ways that make audiences feel more connected rather than less confident, in professionals who admit knowledge gaps while demonstrating commitment to filling them. They understand what Machiavelli observed, that people are drawn to authentic strength more than perfect facades. The fourth clue appears in their relationship with time and timing. Machiavelli was obsessed with the concept of kairos, the right moment for action, versus chronos, the simple passage of time. He noticed that certain individuals seemed to exist in a different temporal dimension, able to accelerate or slow moments according to their will. They spoke with measured pace when others rushed, acted swiftly when others hesitated, and maintained patience when others despaired. Giuliano de' Medici demonstrated this quality during the complex negotiations that followed his family's return from exile. Rather than rushing to reclaim power or seeking immediate revenge against those who had supported their enemies, he moved with calculated deliberation. He would spend hours in apparently casual conversation with former opponents, asking about their families, their business concerns, their hopes for Florence's future. To observers, this seemed like mere politeness or even weakness. But Giuliano understood that he was operating on a different timescale than his contemporaries. While others thought in terms of immediate gains or quarterly results, he was constructing relationships that would serve for decades. He was gathering information that would prove valuable in situations not yet imagined. Most importantly, he was allowing others to become comfortable with his presence, to lower their guard, to begin seeing him not as a threat but as a potential ally. By the time he moved to consolidate power, resistance had already eroded. Those developing irresistible presence today exhibit this same temporal mastery. They're comfortable with strategic silence, knowing that the right word at the right moment carries more weight than volumes of premature explanation. They can sit in meetings without feeling compelled to contribute unless they have something genuinely valuable to add. They understand that their attention is a gift, not an obligation, and they distribute it accordingly. They've learned what Machiavelli called the rhythm of influence. Sometimes this means moving faster than others expect, catching competitors off guard or seizing opportunities while others debate. Other times it means cultivating what appears to be infinite patience, allowing situations to develop until the moment for action becomes unmistakably clear. They've discovered that presence isn't about constant visibility, it's about memorable impact. This temporal mastery extends to how they manage their own energy and attention. While others scatter their focus across multiple priorities, those developing irresistible presence understand the power of concentrated effort. They're willing to say no to good opportunities in order to say yes to great ones. They understand that their most precious resource isn't money or connections, it's their capacity to be fully present in moments that matter. The fifth clue manifests in their approach to conflict and opposition. Machiavelli observed that mediocre leaders either avoided conflict entirely or engaged in it destructively. But those with true presence had discovered a third path. They transformed conflict into opportunity for deeper connection and stronger relationships. Pope Julius II, whom Machiavelli both admired and feared, exemplified this approach. When facing opposition from cardinals who questioned his aggressive expansion of papal territories, Julius didn't simply override their concerns or punish their dissent. Instead, he invited them into increasingly intimate discussions about his vision for the Church's future. He shared not just his plans but his reasoning, his fears, his hopes for legacy. Some cardinals remained unconvinced, but they found themselves personally invested in Julius as a leader, even when they disagreed with his policies. Machiavelli called this the embrace of opposition. Rather than treating disagreement as personal attack or institutional threat, those developing presence see it as information about how their vision appears to others. They understand that opposition often contains seeds of improvement, that critics frequently point toward blind spots that supporters are too polite to mention. In modern contexts, this shows up in leaders who thank employees for bringing problems to their attention rather than punishing messengers, in entrepreneurs who seek out the harshest critics of their products because they provide the most valuable feedback, in political figures who engage substantively with opponents rather than dismissing them. They've learned that people are more likely to be influenced by someone who has genuinely listened to their objections than by someone who simply overwhelms them with counterarguments. This approach requires what Machiavelli termed confident vulnerability. It means being secure enough in one's core vision to allow it to be challenged and, potentially modified. Those developing irresistible presence understand that their ideas improve through opposition, that their leadership deepens through being questioned, that their presence becomes more magnetic when others feel heard and valued even in disagreement. They've discovered the paradoxical truth that yielding often leads to greater influence than insisting. When they acknowledge the validity of criticism, opponents often find themselves defending the criticized position. When they show genuine interest in understanding different perspectives, others reciprocate with openness to their viewpoint. They understand what Machiavelli observed in his study of Roman diplomacy, that the appearance of flexibility often accomplishes what rigid insistence cannot. The sixth clue appears in their relationship with power itself. Machiavelli noticed that those with genuine presence seemed almost uncomfortable with traditional expressions of authority. They didn't seek the biggest office, demand the most deference, or insist on formal recognition of their status. Instead, they exercised what he called invisible dominion, influence that others felt but couldn't exactly locate or define. Cosimo de' Medici, the elder, perfectly embodied this principle. Officially, he held no governmental position in Florence beyond that of private citizen. He never wore robes of office, never sat on elevated platforms, never demanded special ceremonies in his honor. Yet foreign ambassadors sought his opinion before meeting with official rulers. Business leaders adjusted their strategies based on his casual comments. Artists and scholars competed for his casual recognition more than for formal commissions from established nobility. Cosimo understood that visible power often creates visible resistance, while invisible influence flows around obstacles like water finding its level. He exercised authority through relationship, through the knowledge that he genuinely cared about Florence's well-being, through the understanding that his guidance led to better outcomes for all parties involved. People followed his lead not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Those developing irresistible presence today demonstrate this same principle. They're the ones who somehow end up making key decisions despite not having formal authority. Team members naturally defer to their judgment. Colleagues seek their input on problems outside their official expertise. They find themselves invited to meetings where their presence isn't strictly necessary but where others feel something valuable would be missing without them. This influence flows from what Machiavelli called earned authority rather than assigned authority. It develops through consistent demonstration of sound judgment, genuine care for others' well-being, and ability to see solutions that others miss. Those developing this quality understand that real power isn't about getting others to do what you want, it's about creating situations where what you want aligns naturally with what others need. They've learned to exercise influence through questions rather than commands, through suggestions rather than orders, through creating conditions for good decisions rather than making decisions for others. They understand that people are more committed to choices they feel they've made freely than to directives imposed upon them, even when the end result is identical. The seventh and most subtle clue lies in their relationship with mystery and revelation. Machiavelli observed that the most magnetic individuals maintained what he called depths beyond depth, the sense that knowing them better only revealed how much more there was to discover. They weren't secretive or manipulative, but they possessed genuine complexity that unfolded gradually, rewarding continued attention and relationship. Leonardo da Vinci exemplified this quality during his time in Cesare Borgia's court. Conversations with Leonardo revealed his expertise in engineering, then painting, then anatomy, then military strategy, then philosophy, each discovery leading to awareness of additional unexplored territories of knowledge and interest. People found themselves continually surprised by new facets of his understanding, new connections he drew between seemingly unrelated fields, new questions he raised that no one else had thought to ask. This wasn't performance or calculation, it flowed from genuine intellectual curiosity and emotional depth that created natural magnetism. Those developing irresistible presence today possess this same quality of inexhaustibility. They're people others want to know better, not because they're mysterious or withholding, but because they're genuinely interesting in ways that reveal themselves gradually. They've cultivated what Machiavelli called the gift of questions, the ability to ask things that make others think in new ways, to point toward connections and possibilities that illuminate familiar territory from fresh angles. They understand that presence isn't about having all the answers, it's about improving the quality of questions being asked. This depth manifests in their conversation style, which tends toward exploration rather than conclusion. They're comfortable with ambiguity, able to hold multiple perspectives simultaneously without needing immediate resolution. They ask follow-up questions that demonstrate genuine interest in others' thoughts and experiences. They share their own insights in ways that invite further inquiry rather than closing down discussion. They've discovered what Machiavelli knew from observing master diplomats, that people are drawn to those who make them feel more interesting to themselves. Through their attention and curiosity, those developing presence help others discover new facets of their own thoughts and capabilities. They create space for others to surprise themselves, and this gift of expanded self-awareness creates profound loyalty and attraction. Part 2, The Architecture of Magnetism. Understanding these 7 clues is only the beginning of grasping Machiavelli's hidden truth about irresistible presence. The deeper revelation lies in how these qualities work together, creating what he privately termed the architecture of magnetism, a systematic approach to influence that operates below the threshold of conscious awareness while remaining entirely ethical and authentic. Machiavelli's correspondence with his friend Francesco Vettori reveals his growing understanding that presence isn't a collection of techniques but a way of being that emerges from fundamental shifts in how one perceives reality and relationship. Those who develop irresistible magnetism don't adopt new behaviors, they undergo what he called the transformation of sight, learning to see themselves, others, and situations through a lens that naturally generates compelling presence. This transformation begins with what Machiavelli identified as the principle of strategic authenticity. Unlike modern self-help approaches that often advocate either complete transparency or calculated deception, Machiavelli's observation suggested a third path, selective revelation of genuine truth. Those with real presence understand that authenticity isn't about sharing everything, it's about ensuring that what they do share is unquestionably real and carefully chosen for maximum positive impact. Consider how Lorenzo de' Medici handled the delicate negotiations surrounding his daughter's marriage to Giovanni del Ban. Rather than presenting a facade of complete confidence or admitting to every doubt and concern, Lorenzo shared specific vulnerabilities that served larger purposes. He spoke honestly about his hopes for his daughter's happiness, his concerns about the political implications of the alliance, and his desire to balance family interests with Florence's broader needs. This selective authenticity accomplished multiple objectives simultaneously. It demonstrated his genuine care for his daughter's well-being, establishing him as a loving father rather than a cold political calculator. It acknowledged the complexity of the situation, showing respect for others' intelligence and creating space for collaborative problem-solving. It revealed his thinking process without exposing every strategic consideration, allowing others to understand his priorities while maintaining negotiating flexibility. Most importantly, this approach created what Machiavelli called earned trust, confidence based not on blind faith but on demonstrated alignment between stated values and actual behavior. People believed Lorenzo's future promises because his current revelations proved authentic. They felt comfortable sharing their own concerns because he had modeled vulnerable honesty. They became invested in solutions that served his interests because he had shown genuine consideration for theirs. Those developing irresistible presence today understand this same principle. They share struggles that humanize them without undermining confidence in their capabilities. They admit limitations that demonstrate self-awareness while highlighting areas of strength. They reveal enough of their thinking process to help others understand their decisions while maintaining the mystery that keeps people engaged. This strategic authenticity extends beyond verbal communication to what Machiavelli called embodied truth, the alignment between internal state and external expression that creates unconscious credibility. He observed that certain individuals possessed an almost supernatural ability to project emotional states that others found compelling, not through manipulation but through genuine cultivation of attractive internal qualities. Giuliano de' Medici exemplified this during his courtship of Fioretta Guerini. Rather than simply pursuing her through conventional romantic gestures, Giuliano undertook what appeared to be a campaign of personal development. He studied poetry not to impress her with recitation but to genuinely understand beauty and expression. He improved his horsemanship not for display but to embody the grace and power she seemed to appreciate. He cultivated friendships with artists and philosophers not for social advantage but to become the kind of person worthy of her intellectual respect. The result was that when he finally declared his intentions, Fioretta found herself attracted not just to his attention but to who he had become in the process of winning her regard. His presence had transformed through genuine growth rather than performed change. The magnetism she felt was response to authentic development rather than calculated charm. Machiavelli understood that this approach required what he termed patience of becoming. Those developing irresistible presence resist the temptation for quick fixes or dramatic gestures. Instead, they commit to gradual transformation that creates lasting change in how others experience them. They understand that real presence develops like wine through time, attention, and natural processes that cannot be artificially accelerated. This patience manifests in their approach to relationship building. Rather than seeking immediate intimacy or instant influence, they allow connections to develop organically while providing consistent, positive experiences that gradually increase trust and affection. They understand that trying to force emotional connection usually achieves the opposite result, while patient cultivation of genuine value often leads to deeper bonds than originally seemed possible. The architecture of magnetism also depends on what Machiavelli called the principle of productive tension. He noticed that the most compelling individuals didn't simply make others comfortable, they created a subtle, pleasant uncertainty that kept attention engaged. This wasn't anxiety or discomfort, but rather the positive tension of expectation, curiosity, and mild surprise that makes interaction feel dynamic and rewarding. Pope Julius II masterfully employed this principle during his reformation of church practices. Rather than announcing complete changes or maintaining status quo, he introduced modifications gradually, each creating gentle anticipation about what might come next. Cardinals found themselves looking forward to meetings not because they knew what to expect but because they didn't. This productive tension kept attention focused on Julius personally rather than dispersed across various church concerns. The key to productive tension lies in what Machiavelli termed benevolent unpredictability. Those developing presence learn to vary their responses and approaches in ways that keep others slightly off balance but never threatened or confused. They might respond to criticism with curiosity rather than defensiveness, approach serious problems with unexpected humor, or find solutions that no one else had considered. This unpredictability extends to their communication patterns. They avoid falling into conversational routines that allow others to tune out or take their responses for granted. They might ask unexpected questions, share surprising observations, or approach familiar topics from novel angles. They understand that predictability, while comfortable, often leads to invisibility, while productive unpredictability maintains engagement and interest. However, Machiavelli emphasized that this principle requires careful calibration. Too much unpredictability creates anxiety and reduces trust. Too little leads to boredom and reduced attention. Those developing irresistible presence learn to find the optimal level of pleasant surprise that keeps others engaged without making them uncomfortable. They also understand that productive tension must be balanced with what Machiavelli called islands of certainty, consistent qualities or behaviors that others can depend on. These might include reliable availability for important conversations, consistent follow-through on commitments, or steady adherence to core values. The combination of dependable foundation with surface-level variation creates the optimal conditions for sustained magnetic presence. The architecture of magnetism also incorporates what Machiavelli observed as the multiplier effect, the way that certain individuals seem to enhance the capabilities and experiences of those around them. Rather than diminishing others to appear more impressive themselves, those with true presence understood that elevating others ultimately increased their own influence and attractiveness. Cosimo de' Medici demonstrated this principle through his patronage of arts and learning. Rather than simply collecting beautiful objects for private enjoyment, he created opportunities for artists and scholars to do their best work and gain recognition for their achievements. The result was that talent throughout Europe began gravitating toward Florence, not just because of financial support but because association with Cosimo's circle seemed to enhance creative capability and professional success. This wasn't mere generosity, it was strategic elevation that created a network of capable, grateful individuals whose success reflected positively on Cosimo's judgment and influence. Artists spoke enthusiastically about their experiences in his patronage, scholars dedicated their works to him, and ambitious young people sought his mentorship. His presence became associated with opportunity and growth, making others naturally drawn to his sphere of influence. Those developing irresistible presence today understand this same principle. They're the managers who help team members get promoted even when it means losing good people, the mentors who connect protégés with opportunities beyond what they can personally provide, the friends who celebrate others' successes with genuine enthusiasm rather than competitive resentment. They've learned what Machiavelli called the abundance principle, the understanding that influence expands when shared rather than contracts when distributed. By helping others succeed, they create a reputation for positive impact that draws ambitious, capable people into their orbit. By celebrating others' achievements, they become associated with success and progress. By genuinely caring about others' development, they inspire loyalty that transcends immediate self-interest. This multiplier effect extends beyond individual relationships to what Machiavelli termed environmental enhancement. Those with irresistible presence somehow make situations themselves more interesting, productive, or enjoyable. Meetings run more smoothly when they attend, social gatherings feel more dynamic when they participate, projects progress more effectively when they're involved. This enhancement occurs not through domination or control but through what Machiavelli called positive catalysis. Their questions improve the quality of discussion, their suggestions help others think more creatively, their presence encourages higher standards and greater effort from everyone involved. They understand that their most powerful influence comes not from what they do directly but from how they inspire others to perform at higher levels. Part 3, The Hidden Truth revealed the ultimate revelation in Machiavelli's analysis of irresistible presence isn't about technique or strategy, it's about transformation. His hidden truth, scattered across decades of observation and reflection, is that magnetic presence emerges naturally from a fundamental shift in one's relationship with reality itself. Those who develop this quality don't learn new behaviors, they discover new ways of being that make compelling behavior inevitable. This transformation centers on what Machiavelli privately called the paradox of selfless ambition. Through his study of the most influential figures of his era, he discovered that lasting magnetism required abandoning conventional approaches to personal advancement. Instead of focusing on getting what they wanted from others, those with irresistible presence focused on becoming valuable to others in ways that naturally led to their own fulfillment. This paradox confounded Machiavelli initially. His political experience suggested that success required careful calculation of personal advantage and strategic pursuit of self-interest. Yet his observations of truly magnetic individuals revealed something different. Their most powerful influence came precisely from moments when they prioritized others' needs or larger purposes above immediate personal gain. Francesco Sforza's rise from mercenary captain to Duke of Milan perfectly illustrated this paradox. Rather than using his military success to extract maximum personal benefit from various employers, Sforza consistently exceeded expectations and provided value beyond what his contracts specified. When hired to defend a city, he would also strengthen its defenses and train its militia. When employed to conduct a campaign, he would ensure that victory led to lasting advantage rather than temporary gain. Initially, this approach appeared to limit Sforza's immediate profits. Other mercenary leaders accumulated wealth more quickly by charging premium prices and delivering minimum acceptable results. But Sforza's reputation for exceptional value made him increasingly indispensable to employers, who began competing for his services and offering terms far more favorable than standard mercenary contracts. More importantly, his consistent demonstration of genuine care for employers' long-term success created personal loyalty that transcended business relationships. When Sforza finally made his bid for independent power, many of his former employers supported him not from fear or obligation but from genuine belief that his leadership would serve their broader interests better than existing alternatives. Machiavelli understood that this pattern revealed something profound about the nature of influence itself. Rather than operating as a zero-sum competition where one person's gain required another's loss, true magnetism created positive-sum dynamics where everyone involved benefited from association. Those developing irresistible presence learned to find solutions that served multiple parties simultaneously, to pursue goals that elevated rather than diminished others, to exercise power in ways that increased rather than decreased others' capabilities. This shift from competitive to collaborative orientation required what Machiavelli called the courage of abundance. In a world where scarcity seemed obvious and competition appeared inevitable, those developing magnetic presence had to risk believing that there was enough success, recognition, and fulfillment to go around. They had to act on faith that helping others achieve their goals would somehow lead to achievement of their own. This faith proved justified through what Machiavelli observed as the principle of reciprocal elevation. When someone consistently helped others succeed, those others naturally wanted to reciprocate. When someone made others feel valuable and capable, those others sought opportunities to demonstrate their value and capability in return. When someone created environments where others could shine, those others worked to maintain and protect those environments. The result was that those practicing selfless ambition found themselves surrounded by competent, grateful, motivated people who actively sought ways to support their success. Rather than having to manipulate or coerce cooperation, they discovered that genuine service created voluntary dedication that was both more effective and more sustainable than forced compliance. Modern research in organizational psychology confirms Machiavelli's observation through studies of what contemporary scholars call servant leadership and transformational influence. Leaders who focus on developing others' capabilities and serving organizational purposes create higher levels of engagement, creativity, and voluntary effort than those who emphasize personal authority or individual achievement. But Machiavelli's insight went beyond leadership theory to encompass what he termed the alchemy of presence itself. Through careful observation, he discovered that magnetic individuals had learned to transform their fundamental relationship with attention, time, and energy in ways that made them naturally compelling to others. This transformation began with what he called the gift of complete attention. Unlike most people, who listen while planning their response, thinking about other concerns, or waiting for their turn to speak, those developing irresistible presence had learned to be fully present with others in a way that felt almost supernatural to those experiencing it. Giuliano de' Medici exemplified this quality during his diplomatic missions. When meeting with foreign dignitaries, he would clear his schedule completely, put aside all other concerns, and focus entirely on understanding their perspectives, interests, and concerns. He didn't just hear their words, he attended to their tone, their body language, their hesitations, and their underlying emotions. He asked follow-up questions that demonstrated genuine interest in their thoughts and feelings. The result was that these dignitaries often felt more understood and appreciated after one conversation with Giuliano than after multiple meetings with other diplomats. They found themselves sharing more than they had intended, considering perspectives they hadn't previously explored, and feeling personally valued in a way that transcended political calculation. This complete attention created what Machiavelli called the mirror effect. When someone felt truly seen and understood, they began to see the person providing that attention as exceptionally wise, insightful, and valuable. The quality of attention they received reflected back as perception of the giver's superior capabilities and character. Those developing irresistible presence today demonstrate this same quality. They're the people others seek out when facing important decisions because conversations with them feel illuminating and clarifying. They're the friends others call during crisis because they provide not just sympathy but genuine understanding. They're the colleagues others prefer for collaborative projects because they listen in ways that make ideas seem more developed and possibilities more clear. This gift of attention extends beyond individual conversations to what Machiavelli observed as environmental awareness. Those with magnetic presence possessed unusual sensitivity to group dynamics, unspoken tensions, and emerging opportunities. They could sense when meetings were becoming unproductive, when relationships were under strain, or when situations were ripe for intervention or innovation. This awareness allowed them to provide value in subtle but significant ways. They might ask exactly the right question to redirect a stalled discussion, offer precisely the right suggestion to resolve a brewing conflict, or propose exactly the right timing for a new initiative. Their interventions often appeared effortless and natural, but their impact was consistently positive and memorable. Machiavelli understood that this environmental sensitivity developed through what he called the practice of strategic stillness. Rather than always trying to advance their own agendas or inject their own ideas, those developing presence learned to create space for observation, reflection, and intuitive understanding. They became comfortable with silence, patient with process, and attentive to subtleties that others missed in their rush to action. This stillness wasn't passive, it was actively receptive. It required courage to resist the impulse to fill silence with speech, wisdom to distinguish between productive and unproductive intervention, and confidence to trust that the right moment for action would become clear through careful attention. The ultimate expression of Machiavelli's hidden truth appears in what he called the paradox of effortless mastery. Those who had fully developed irresistible presence seemed to achieve remarkable results with minimal apparent effort. Their influence appeared natural rather than forced, their success seemed inevitable rather than struggled for, their magnetism felt like an inherent quality rather than a developed skill. This effortlessness emerged from what Machiavelli termed perfect alignment, the integration of personal values, natural abilities, and external circumstances in ways that made compelling action feel like simple expression of authentic self. Those achieving this state no longer had to remember to be magnetic, they had become people whose natural way of being was inherently attractive to others. Lorenzo de' Medici achieved this state during his final years, when his influence extended far beyond Florence to affect cultural and political developments throughout Europe. Letters from contemporary observers describe meetings with Lorenzo as feeling less like negotiations and more like conversations with destiny itself. His presence carried such authority and magnetism that others found themselves naturally aligning with his vision, not from compulsion but from recognition that his perspectives served their deepest interests. This wasn't performance or manipulation, it was the fruit of decades spent cultivating genuine wisdom, authentic care for others, and deep understanding of human nature. Lorenzo had become someone whose success naturally served others' well-being, whose influence naturally enhanced rather than diminished those around him, whose magnetism naturally drew others into more fulfilling and productive relationships. Machiavelli's hidden truth is that this state of effortless mastery is available to anyone willing to undertake the fundamental transformation required. It doesn't depend on exceptional natural gifts, favorable circumstances, or special opportunities. It emerges from consistent practice of principles that gradually reshape one's relationship with self, others, and reality itself. The 7 clues Machiavelli identified: grace under pressure, intuitive understanding, transformative vulnerability, temporal mastery, conflict alchemy, invisible authority, and inexhaustible depth aren't discrete skills to be learned but natural expressions of this deeper transformation. They appear automatically when someone has successfully shifted from competitive to collaborative orientation, from scarcity to abundance mindset, from self-focus to other-serving motivation. This transformation doesn't happen overnight, and it isn't always comfortable. It requires abandoning familiar strategies that may have provided some success, risking vulnerability in relationships that feel safer when kept superficial, and trusting that serving others' interests will somehow lead to fulfillment of one's own. It demands what Machiavelli called the courage of becoming, willingness to grow into someone you've never been before. But, for those who persist through this transformation, the rewards extend far beyond increased influence or professional success. They discover what Machiavelli himself found in his later years, that irresistible presence isn't ultimately about affecting others, it's about becoming the kind of person you yourself would want to follow, admire, and trust. It's about developing character that naturally generates the respect, loyalty, and affection that makes life deeply satisfying and inherently meaningful. The hidden truth Machiavelli coded in his writings isn't a strategy for gaining power over others, it's a pathway to becoming someone worthy of the power they already possess. It's recognition that the magnetism we admire in others isn't mysterious or magical but, rather, the natural result of fundamental choices about how to live, how to treat others, and how to approach the endless opportunities for growth and service that life provides. In the end, Machiavelli's greatest insight wasn't about politics or power, it was about the transformation available to any human being willing to risk becoming their best possible self. Those who develop irresistible presence don't learn techniques for influencing others, they become people others naturally want to be influenced by. And that transformation, once achieved, creates ripples of positive change that extend far beyond personal success to touch every relationship and situation they encounter. This is the hidden truth that Machiavelli understood but could never state directly in his political writings, that the highest form of power is the power to inspire others to discover their own greatness, and that this power emerges naturally from the commitment to becoming great oneself. Those who master this understanding don't just develop irresistible presence, they become forces for positive transformation in a world that desperately needs examples of what human excellence can accomplish.